The modern presidencies of Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama all dealt with challenges. Some challenges were more significant than others. The Reagan years in the White House began with the continuation of the Cold War division of international power and influence between the United States and the Soviet Union. The nuclear weapons capability of both sides was massive. Over the course of Reagan's 2 terms in office, the Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The events leading up to the collapse were rapid and surprising. The Soviet Union built up its military arsenal in the late 1970s and early 1980s, but the United States still maintained a qualitative edge. President Reagan began modernizing U.S. forces and contemplating a new anti-ballistic missile shield called the Strategic Defense Initiative, which was sometimes referred to as Star Wars. The Soviets could not respond to this modernization because the cost was beyond their resources. The Soviet Union's economy was in great decline after years of failure in agricultural and industrial production. Reagan put further pressure on his Cold War rivals by persuading the Saudi Arabians to lower the price of crude oil, thereby undercutting the Soviet Union's chief source of revenue, oil exports. The Soviet president, Mikhail Gorbachev, decided to begin policies focused on economic rebuilding called perestroika and of political reform called glasnost. President Gorbachev set up policies allowing free speech, free press, and other reforms. The changes put the Soviet Union on a path to democratic government. President Reagan responded to these changes and began open dialogue with Gorbachev. The more cooperative relationship between the Cold War rivals resulted in a nuclear arms agreement between the United States and the Soviet Union. Gorbachev's reforms led to a collapse of the Soviet Union through a reduction in the Kremlin's control over the various states that comprised the Soviet Union. The Eastern European nations, which had been satellite states of the Soviet Union since the close of World War II, also rebelled against Soviet control and established their own democratic states. By 1989, the Cold War was over. The effort of President Reagan to foster the relationship with Gorbachev helped to end the Cold War and was a highlight of his presidency. After Ronald Reagan served 2 terms as president, his vice president, George H.W. Bush, was elected in 1988. He served 1 term, which included a costly economic downturn and the successful use of military resources in the 1991 Gulf War against Saddam Hussein in Iraq. President George H.W. Bush lost his re-election bid to the Democratic candidate Bill Clinton in 1992. Like George H.W. Bush, Clinton's presidency had successes and challenges. One of Clinton's highlights was the end of the national budget deficit, which resulted in a budget surplus. This economic success was achieved through tax cuts and reduced government spending. However, Clinton's presidency was challenged by a scandal that led to his impeachment. Bill Clinton became the 2nd president in United States history to be impeached. The House of Representatives charged him with perjury and obstruction of justice. The impeachment charges were based on accusations of improper use of money from a real estate deal and allegations that Clinton lied under oath about the improper relationship he had with a White House intern. Clinton denied the charges, and the Senate acquitted him, allowing the president to remain in office and finish his 2nd term. Clinton's 2nd term ended with the 2000 election of the Republican candidate George W. Bush. George W. Bush entered the White House after a tumultuous 2000 presidential election that ended with legal challenges of the result. The Democratic candidate was Clinton's Vice President Al Gore. Although Bush won the Electoral College vote, Gore won the popular vote in the election. The contested vote centered on Florida's election results. The margin of victory in Florida was so close that a mandatory recount occurred. Gore requested a hand count of questionable ballots. All of these processes ran afoul of Florida election law and resulted in lawsuits filed in both state and federal courts over the appropriateness of vote recounts. Ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled that a statewide vote recount would be unconstitutional, and Bush was declared the winner in Florida. The nation was greatly divided moving forward to the 2001 inauguration of George W. Bush. The political division caused by the controversial election was overshadowed by the national tragedy experienced on September 11, 2001. On that fateful day, an Islamist terrorist group launched a series of attacks on the United States using airplanes as weapons. The World Trade Center Twin Towers in New York City and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. were hit, and another airliner crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania after passengers and crew members forced the terrorists to crash on its way to an unspecified Washington, D.C. target. In response, and with overwhelming support of both Congress and the American people, Bush quickly signed the Patriot Act. The law allowed the United States government to hold foreign citizens suspected of being terrorists for up to 7 days without charging them with a crime. The law also increased the ability of American law enforcement agencies to search private communications and personal records to thwart future terrorist attacks. The Patriot Act later came under scrutiny as questions of privacy emerged. Bush's administration also created the Department of Homeland Security in the wake of the terrorist attack, and tasked the agency with protecting the United States from terrorist attacks and responding to natural disasters. Most of these responses to the 9/11 attack were supported by Americans at the time. In October 2001, Bush took another step in his response to the September 11th attack. He authorized Operation Enduring Freedom, which was an invasion of Afghanistan by the United States military and allied forces. Afghanistan's Taliban government was harboring the al-Qaeda leadership. The Allied forces quickly defeated the Taliban government and destroyed the al-Qaeda network in Afghanistan. However, al-Qaeda's leader, Osama bin Laden, escaped. The invasion of Afghanistan was part of President Bush's larger war on terrorism, for which he built an international coalition to fight the al-Qaeda network and other terrorist groups responsible for the attack on the United States. In March 2003, American and British troops invaded Iraq in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Iraq's president, Saddam Hussein, went into hiding while U.S. forces searched for weapons of mass destruction. Bush feared Hussein had the weapons and could supply them to terrorists for use against the United States. No weapons of mass destruction were found during the operation. However, Hussein was captured, convicted of crimes against humanity, and executed in 2006. Bush's presidency was challenging from the beginning. He had the support of most Americans immediately following the September 11, 2001 attacks, but lost some support when no weapons of mass destruction were found in Iraq. The economy of the United States has experienced highs and lows during modern presidential administrations. To address the 1970s stagnant economy, President Reagan instituted a series of domestic policies often referred to as Reaganomics. President Reagan held that if Americans had more money to spend, then the economy would improve. There were 4 key components to Reaganomics. 1. Reduce government spending. 2. Reduce income tax and capital gains tax. 3. Reduce government regulation. 4. Control the money supply to reduce inflation. The economy grew during the Reagan years of the 1980s, but the growth came with large federal budget deficits, leading to economic problems in the 1990s, which challenged George H.W. Bush. Ultimately, these challenges were not addressed until President Clinton's presidency in the 1990s. President Clinton ended the federal budget deficit and balanced the federal budget through tax cuts and reduced federal spending. President George W. Bush continued instituting tax cuts during his presidency and increased federal spending in the wake of the September 11th attacks. One of the great challenges of his second term was the subprime mortgage crisis in 2007 and 2008, that led to a period known as the Great Recession, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. This became one of President Barack Obama's primary focuses as he entered his first term in 2008. His economic policy included a stimulus package to reduce the unemployment rate in the short term. And for long-term economic growth, he provided tax cuts for middle-class families, improved education, and invested in physical and technological infrastructure. Technology in the late 20th century dramatically changed society. The efficiency of new technological innovations led to greater productivity in businesses, industrial, and personal sectors. Communication was revolutionized as new platforms took hold at the start of the new millennium. Scholars at the University of Pennsylvania designed the first computer in 1946. Their device was known as ENIAC, Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. While it was the first step into the new technological age, it was not practical for widespread consumer use. ENIAC was of enormous size and had a limited capacity for output. The next step was to reduce the size of the computer's hardware in order to make the technology viable for business and eventually personal use. That development came about in 1971 with the invention of the microprocessor. The power of ENIAC was thus harnessed and contained in a silicon chip the size of a postage stamp. The capability of computers was growing very quickly, with computation and word processing functions. Technology innovators were also improving the speed at which computers were able to process data. As computer technology improved, a vast new world of instant global communication arose. During the 1980s and 1990s, the Internet was developed as a conglomeration of computer networks from around the world. Personal computers became popular as the Internet became more accessible to individuals. No longer was computer technology used solely in business and manufacturing settings. Home computers became more affordable and practical as they became accessible to individuals. A new platform for communication emerged from the development of the Internet. The term email is short for electronic mail. In the mid-1990s, the use of email started to become a popular mode for sending messages instantly over the Internet. No longer did commercial companies or individuals have to wait for written documents, messages, or information to be physically transported. Instead, email is an immediate method of information transfer. Email changed the way business communication is conducted and the way individuals often communicate. Social media is another recent technological phenomenon in which individuals share information in online communities. Popular social media platforms include Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. Individuals create accounts and share or post messages, photos, and videos to the online community they create. The popularity of social media has dramatically increased in the first few decades of the 21st century. Social media is becoming a source for news and instant information sharing. While popular, there are growing concerns about the credibility and reliability of some information disseminated through social media. Cyberbullying is another problem that has resulted from the advent of social media. Technological changes in the 21st century have been dramatic. Businesses and individuals rely heavily on computers, the Internet, and social media for communication and productivity. While innovation has increased global connectivity and efficiency, there have been some negative consequences that came along with the new technology. Privacy, trustworthiness of information being presented, and cybersecurity risks are all challenges that must be addressed as technology continues to evolve. The candidates in the presidential election of 2008 campaigned on the issues of the lagging economy and the war to fight terrorism. Trillions of dollars had been spent on the war in Iraq. The economy was weakening and unemployment was on the rise. It was a politically charged campaign that led to the historic outcome of the election in which the first person of color was elected as President of the United States. The Democratic Party nominated Barack Obama. His platform of hope and change, delivered with skilled oratory, captured the attention of his party and many Americans. Obama was relatively new to national politics, having only served one term as a senator from Illinois. Barack Obama was a 47-year-old Harvard-educated lawyer when he was elected president. He was the biracial son of a white woman from Kansas and a black man from Kenya. Obama's Republican opponent in the 2008 presidential election was Senator John McCain of Arizona. In contrast to Obama's youth and lack of national political experience, McCain was a veteran on both counts. He was 72 years old during the campaign in 2008, had served in the United States Congress for 25 years, and was a Vietnam War veteran who was shot down and captured as a prisoner of war. The campaign between McCain and Obama was hard-fought. Ultimately, Obama won with an Electoral College victory of 365 to 173. President Barack Obama was re-elected in 2012 and served 2 terms as president. Some of the major outcomes of his presidency were the controversial passage of health care reform, Obamacare, in 2010. His foreign policy effort was highlighted by the elimination of Osama bin Laden, who was America's prime target in the War on Terror after the September 11th attack. A Navy SEAL team killed bin Laden on May 11, 2011. Throughout Obama's historic presidency, there was a growing conservative movement that opposed the efforts of the president and the Democratic Party. The result was a deep political divide in the United States that pitted Democrats and Republicans in bitter state and national elections.